Captain Zilara Voss stood before the massive viewing portal of the Nexus station, her violet eyes reflecting the swirling nebula beyond. Her crystalline skin caught the ambient light, creating patterns that would have been beautiful if not for the tension radiating from her tall, elegant frame. The datapad in her six-fingered hand trembled slightly as she read the assignment for the third time. Interspecies Bonding Protocol 7 Alpha. Subject, human male. Duration, 6 lunar cycles. Objective, establish genetic compatibility for future colonization efforts. Behind her, the station's AI hummed softly. Captain Voss, your biometric readings indicate elevated stress levels. Shall I recommend a calming neural frequency? No, Kithara, Zilara replied, her voice carrying the melodic tones of her species. I need to think clearly about this nightmare. The Xanthari had always prided themselves on their intellectual superiority, their refined culture, their harmony with technology. They were beings of light and thought, not driven by primitive urges, like the species they encountered across the galaxy. And now, the High Council expected her to bond with a human, a species known for their chaotic emotions, their violent tendencies, and their disturbing habit of consuming other life forms. A human arrives in 2 standard hours, Kithara informed her. His designation is David Torres, age 32, occupation, mechanical engineer. He was selected from over 10,000 candidates. Zilara shuddered. What criteria did they use? Most likely to survive first contact without attacking something? Actually, the selection process focused on adaptability, emotional stability, and genetic markers compatible with Xanthari physiology. Mr. Torres scored exceptionally high in all categories. The captain turned away from the viewport, her flowing robes rustling like wind through crystal chimes. She had seen humans before during diplomatic missions, their crude technology, their loud voices, their tendency to touch everything with their bare hands. The thought of extended contact with one made her skin crawl. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, David Torres was having his own crisis aboard the transport vessel. He sat in what the aliens called a comfort chamber, though the floating furniture, and walls that changed color based on his mood were anything but comfortable. The gravity felt wrong, the air tasted metallic, and everything around him seemed to be watching. This is insane, he muttered, running his hands through his dark hair. 6 months with an alien princess who probably thinks I'm some kind of savage. The transport's AI spoke in perfectly accented English. Mr. Torres, your assigned partner is Captain Zilara Voss, a distinguished officer of the Xanthari Defense Corps. She has commendations for great. So she's a warrior princess who can kill me 17 different ways. That's so much better. David had volunteered for the program after his divorce, thinking it would be an adventure, a chance to see the galaxy. Now, faced with the reality of actually living with an alien for 6 months, he was questioning every decision that had led him here. The briefing materials had been clear. The Xanthari were advanced, telepathic, and considered humans to be barely evolved primates. The docking procedures will commence shortly, the AI announced. Please prepare for transition to Nexus Station. As the transport shuddered slightly, David closed his eyes and tried to remember the meditation techniques from his training. The xenobiologists had warned him that first contact would be crucial. One wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, and he could destroy any chance of successful cooperation. Got back on the station. Zilara was receiving her own final briefing from Commander Thylos, her superior and longtime friend. Remember, Zilara, this isn't just about you. The future of our species' expansion depends on these bonding protocols. If we can't coexist with humans, we'll be limited to our current territory while they spread across the galaxy like some kind of plague. Such encouraging words, Zilara replied dryly. Anything else to boost my confidence? Actually, yes. They Preliminary scans show this particular human has unusual neural patterns. His mind might be more compatible with ours than expected. Before Zalara could respond, the docking alert chimed through the station. The human had arrived. First contact and unexpected reactions. Docking bay filled with the hiss of equalizing atmospheres as the transport sealed against the station's hull. Zalara stood at attention, her ceremonial robes replaced by a more practical uniform that still managed to look elegant. Her heart, or the closest equivalent her species, possessed hammered in her chest as the airlock cycled open. David Torres stepped through the threshold, and both beings stopped dead in their tracks. He was not what she had expected. The humans she had encountered before were either diplomats, polished and artificial, or military personnel rigid and aggressive. This one moved with easy confidence, his brown eyes taking in his surroundings with curiosity rather than fear. He was taller than she had anticipated, his shoulders broad beneath the standard-issue jumpsuit, and when he smiled, it reached his eyes. "Captain Voss?" His voice was deeper than she had expected, carrying none of the harsh tones she associated with human speech. "I'm David Torres. Thank you for agreeing to this arrangement." Zalara blinked, her translator implant working overtime to process not just his words, but the emotional undertones. There was no aggression, no crude bravado. Instead, she detected genuine gratitude and carefully contained nervousness. "Mr. Torres," she replied, her voice slightly strained. "Welcome to Nexus Station." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, both acutely aware of the historical significance of this meeting. Finally, David gestured toward the station's interior. "So, do we get the grand tour, or do you just throw me in a cell until I prove I'm not going to contaminate your civilization?" The joke, for she realized it was meant as humor, caught her off guard. Among her people, humor was a sophisticated art form involving complex wordplay and cultural references. This human's approach was direct, almost childlike, yet somehow charming. "You will be assigned quarters adjacent to mine," she said, leading him through the corridors. "The cultural exchange protocols have been prepared according to both our species' needs." As they walked, David couldn't help but stare at everything around him. The walls seemed to pulse with soft light, and the air itself felt alive with energy. But it was his companion who truly captured his attention. The briefings had mentioned that Zenthari were tall and elegant, but they hadn't prepared him for the reality of Zalara's presence. She moved like liquid starlight, her violet eyes reflecting depths he couldn't fathom. Her skin seemed to be made of living crystal, shifting between translucent and opaque as her emotions changed. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in his chest. "This is the cultural center," Zalara explained, gesturing to a vast chamber filled with floating displays and interactive holograms. "You'll spend several hours here each day learning about our customs and history. And you'll be learning about mine too, right?" David asked. "This is supposed to be an exchange." She paused, clearly not having considered this aspect fully. "I suppose that would be ... logical." They continued the tour, and despite herself, Zalara found herself fascinated by David's reactions. He asked intelligent questions, showed genuine interest in their technology, and most surprisingly, he seemed to understand the aesthetic principles behind their architecture. "This is beautiful," he said, stopping before a sculpture that shifted and flowed like captured aurora. "It's like music made visible." Zalara stared at him in shock. No human had ever described their art in such terms. In fact, most Zenthari would have used similar words. "You ... appreciate it? How could I not? It's incredible. The way the light flows through those crystalline structures, the way the colors harmonize, it's like watching a symphony." Something shifted in Zalara's chest, a warmth she hadn't expected. This human was not the crude barbarian she had imagined. There was depth to him, sensitivity that challenged everything she thought she knew about his species. As they reached the residential quarters, David turned to her with a serious expression. Look, I know this is weird for both of us. I've never lived with an alien before, and I'm guessing you've never had to deal with a human for extended periods. But maybe we can make this work if we're honest with each other. Honest about what? About the fact that we're both terrified. His smile was self-deprecating. I'm scared I'll do something offensive or dangerous. You're scared I'm some kind of savage who'll contaminate your perfect world. Maybe if we admit that, we can move past it. Zelara felt her defenses crumbling. This human's emotional directness was unlike anything in her experience, yet it felt refreshing. You are not what I expected, she admitted quietly. Good or bad? She considered the question carefully. Different, and perhaps that is not entirely unwelcome. As they stood outside their respective quarters, both felt the weight of the months ahead. Neither could have imagined that this moment of tentative acceptance would be the first step toward something that would change both their worlds forever. 3 weeks into their cohabitation, Zelara found herself looking forward to their daily interaction sessions. What had begun as formal cultural exchanges had evolved into something more resembling friendship. David's questions about Synthari society were thoughtful and penetrating, often revealing aspects of their culture that she had never considered. So your people communicate through harmonic frequencies as well as words, David said during their morning discussion in the station's garden dome. That's why your language sounds so musical to me. You can hear the harmonics? Zelara asked, surprised. Most species can only perceive our verbal communication. I've always been sensitive to sound frequencies. It's why I became an engineer. I can hear when machines are operating outside their optimal parameters. He paused, studying her face. When you're happy, your voice has this underlying chime, like silver bells. When you're nervous, it drops to a lower register with subtle vibrations. Zelara's skin shifted to a deeper violet, the Xanthari equivalent of a blush. No one had ever described her emotional states with such accuracy, not even her own people. And what do you hear now? She asked softly. David listened carefully, his head tilted slightly. Curiosity, maybe a little excitement, and something else. Something I don't have words for. What he heard was the harmonic signature of growing attraction, but Zelara didn't correct him. She wasn't ready to examine those feelings herself. Their daily routines had become comfortable rituals. David would wake early and prepare what he called coffee, a bitter earth beverage that he claimed was essential for proper brain function. Zelara would perform her morning meditation, her crystalline skin catching the artificial sunlight of the garden dome. They would share breakfast, David trying various Xanthari foods with adventurous enthusiasm while Zelara carefully sampled Earth cuisine from the station's replicators. This is actually not terrible, she said one morning, tasting something David called pancakes. High praise from someone who usually eats crystallized energy, he replied with a grin. We do not eat crystallized energy, she protested, though her voice carried the harmonic of amusement. Could have fooled me. That stuff you had yesterday looked like it was mined from a rainbow. Their banter had become natural, comfortable. David's humor was beginning to make sense to her, and she found herself attempting jokes of her own. More importantly, she was learning to read his emotional states as clearly as he read hers. One evening, as they sat in the observation lounge watching the star patterns shift past the station, David grew unusually quiet. What troubles you? Zelara asked, her voice carrying the harmonic of concern. I got a message from Earth today. My ex-wife is remarrying. He stared out at the stars. Stupid, right? We've been divorced for 2 years, and I'm literally in another galaxy, but it still stings. Zelara considered his words carefully. Emotional pain was universal, but each species experienced it differently. Among my people, we have a saying, "The heart that once loved deeply carries the echo of that love forever." But it also has space for new harmonies. That's beautiful, David said softly, and weirdly comforting. You cared for her deeply? I thought I did. But looking back, I think I was in love with the idea of her, not who she really was. We never really connected, you know? Never really understood each other. Zelara nodded slowly. Understanding is rare between any two beings. When it occurs, it should be treasured. Their eyes met across the observation lounge, and something passed between them, a recognition, a moment of perfect comprehension. David felt his pulse quicken, and Zelara's skin began to shift through subtle color changes that he was learning to interpret. Zelara, he began, then stopped. I should probably head back to my quarters. Yes, she agreed, but neither of them moved. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility and uncertainty. Finally, David stood, his movements careful and deliberate. Thank you for listening, he said, and for the wisdom about echoes and harmonies. Thank you for sharing your pain with me, she replied. It is an honor to be trusted with such things. As David left the observation lounge, Zelara remained behind, her thoughts churning. She was beginning to understand that her initial fears about humans had been based on ignorance and prejudice. David was not a savage or a beast. He was a complex being with depths she was only beginning to explore. More troubling was the realization that she was developing feelings for him that went far beyond the requirements of their cultural exchange. The harmonics of attraction in her voice were becoming harder to suppress, and she caught herself looking forward to his presence with an intensity that frightened her. Back in his quarters, David was having similar thoughts. The sophisticated, ethereal being he had expected to find cold and distant was proving to be warm, intelligent, and surprisingly vulnerable. Her laughter, when he could coax it from her, was like music made manifest as he lay in his bed. Staring at the ceiling that mimicked Earth's night sky, David wondered if he was falling in love with an alien princess. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. The crisis came during their 7th week together in the most unexpected way. David was working in the station's engineering bay, helping to calibrate some equipment that had been malfunctioning, when an alarm began blaring throughout the facility. Hall. Breach in Sector 7, the AI announced. Emergency protocols initiated. David's training kicked in immediately. He raced through the corridors toward the breach, his mind calculating pressure differentials and structural stress patterns. What he found made his blood run cold. Zelara was trapped in a sealed chamber, the atmospheric controls failing as the breach in the outer hull grew larger. Through the transparent aluminum barrier, he could see her struggling with the manual. Override, her crystalline skin flickering between different colors as panic set in. Zelara. He slammed his hand against the control panel, but the system was locked down. Kithara, open this door. I cannot, Mr. Torres. The safety protocols prevent opening the chamber while the atmospheric pressure is unstable. David's mind raced. The chamber's atmosphere was designed for Zentari physiology. If it failed completely, Zelara would suffocate in minutes. But the safety systems wouldn't allow the door to open until the breach was sealed, and that could take hours. Override. The safety protocols, he demanded. I cannot. The risk to station integrity is too great. David looked at Zelara through the barrier. Her movements were becoming sluggish, her skin shifting to a pale, translucent state that he had learned indicated distress. In that moment, all his fears about their differences, about the impossibility of their situation, became irrelevant. Kithara, if I manually seal the breach, will you open the door? Mr. Torres, manual repair of a hull breach is extremely dangerous. The radiation levels? Will I die? Not immediately, but prolonged exposure could cause severe cellular damage. David was already moving, grabbing an emergency repair kit and heading for the airlock. That's all I need to know. What happened next would become legend throughout the station. David Torres, armed with nothing but determination and improvised tools, went into the void between the hull sections. The breach was larger than expected, the metal twisted and torn by some kind of debris impact. Working in the harsh environment of space, with radiation burning through his hastily donned protective suit, he began the painstaking process of sealing the rupture, Zalara watching from her chamber saw him through the external sensors. Her people prized logic and careful calculation above all else. But here was this human, risking his life, without hesitation because she was in danger. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He was doing this for her, specifically for her, not out of duty or protocol, but out of something deeper. Took David 43 minutes to seal the breach, his hands working despite the radiation burns that were starting to show on his exposed skin. When the final patch was in place and the atmospheric pressure stabilized, Kithara finally opened the chamber door. Zalara stumbled out, her breath coming in ragged gasps, and found David slumped against the corridor wall. His face was pale, his hands shaking from radiation exposure, but he was smiling. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Am I hurt?" She repeated, incredulous. "David, you could have died." "Why would you?" "Because I couldn't lose you," he said simply. "I couldn't just watch you die in there." Zalara dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his injured form. Among her people, physical contact was rare, reserved for the most intimate relationships. But in this moment, she didn't hesitate. Her crystalline fingers touched his face, and she felt the warmth of his skin, the rapid pulse of his heart. "You beautiful, impossible fool," she whispered, and her voice carried harmonics he had never heard before. Love, wonder, and something that might have been reverence. David's eyes widened as he heard the change in her voice. "Zalara, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I have been wrong about everything. About humans, about you, about what is possible between us." Her skin began to shift, colors flowing across her form like aurora. "I am saying that I love you, David Torres, and I nearly lost you before I could find the courage to tell you." The medical team arrived then, but not before David reached up and touched her face in return, his fingers tracing the delicate patterns of her skin. "I love you too," he said. "I think I have since that first day when you made that joke about contaminating your perfect world." As the medical drones began treating David's radiation exposure, Zalara refused to leave his side. The other Xanthari on the station watched in amazement as their composed, logical captain held the hand of a human, her harmonics singing with emotions that required no translation. News of the incident spread quickly through both the station and the communication networks. A human risking his life to save a Xanthari abandoning protocol for love. It was unprecedented, scandalous, and absolutely undeniable. But as David recovered in the medical bay, with Zalara maintaining a constant vigil beside him, neither of them cared about the implications. They had found something rare and precious in the vastness of space, a connection that transcended species, culture, and every barrier that had been placed between them. 6 months after their first meeting, David and Zalara stood once again in the station's observation lounge, but everything had changed. The formal cultural exchange had evolved into something far more significant, a genuine partnership that was reshaping how both species viewed each other. "The Council has approved the extended bonding protocols," Zalara announced, her voice carrying harmonics of joy and excitement. "We can continue our research indefinitely." David smiled, his arm wrapped around her waist in a gesture that had become natural despite the initial awkwardness of interspecies affection. Research. Is that what we're calling it now? We are pioneering new forms of interspecies cooperation, she replied with mock seriousness. The data we generate will be invaluable for future cultural exchanges. Right. Very scientific. He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, marveling at how her skin seemed to respond to his touch with subtle shifts of color and warmth. Their relationship had become the talk of the galaxy. Video logs of their daily interactions were being studied by xenobiologists and sociologists across dozens of worlds. The sight of a human and a Xanthari working together, laughing together, clearly, in love, had shattered preconceptions on both sides. I received a message from my brother today, Zelara said, settling into David's embrace. He wants to meet you. The one who's a diplomat? The one who called humans barbaric primates in his last correspondence. Her harmonics carried amusement. He's revised his opinions. David chuckled. I'm sensing a pattern here. Maybe. We're not the only ones who've been wrong about each other. Through the observation window, they could see the newest arrivals to the station, 3 more humans and Xanthari pairs, volunteers for the expanded cultural exchange program. The success of David and Zalara's relationship had opened doors that had been closed for centuries. Look at them, Zalara murmured, watching as one of the new human arrivals attempted to communicate with his Xanthari partner through exaggerated gestures. They're so nervous. We were nervous too, David reminded her. You threatened to murder me at least 6 times in the first week. I never threatened to murder you. I merely contemplated the logistics of hiding your body in the recycling systems. So romantic. Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Thylos, who had become something of a surrogate father to their unusual courtship. The elderly Xanthari skin patterns shifted to warm gold, the equivalent of a smile. The High Council has made their decision, he announced. The interspecies bonding program is being expanded to include 12 more worlds. Your success has proven that cooperation between humans and Xanthari is not only possible, but beneficial. What does that mean for us? David asked. It means you have a choice. You can remain here as program coordinators, or you can return to either Earth or the Xanthari homeworld to establish new cultural exchange centers. David and Zelara exchanged glances, their communication now so natural that words were often unnecessary. Actually, David said slowly, we have a different proposal. Oh? We want to explore the frontier together. There are hundreds of worlds out there where first contact hasn't been established. If humans and Xanthari can work together like this, imagine what we could accomplish as a team. Thylos' skin shifted through several colors as he processed. This suggestion, you want to become explorers? We want to become bridges, Zelara corrected. David has shown me that the unknown doesn't have to be feared. It can be embraced. Together, we could help other species see that cooperation is possible. The High Council will need to approve such a mission. Then we'll wait for their decision, David said. But either way, we're not going back to the way things were. We've changed too much. As Thylos departed to relay their request, David and Zelara returned to their contemplation of the stars. The nebula outside the station was shifting, its colors creating new patterns that seemed to dance just for them. Do you ever regret it? Zelara asked softly. Giving up your life on Earth for this? David considered the question seriously. I didn't give up my life. I found it. Everything before you is just ... preparation. Even your marriage? Especially my marriage. If I hadn't learned what connection wasn't, I might never have recognized what it was when I found it with you. Zylara's skin shifted to the deep violet that indicated profound emotion. I feared you would be a beast who would contaminate our perfect world. Instead, you showed me that perfection was never the goal growth was. And you showed me that intelligence and beauty could coexist with compassion and humor. Who knew aliens could be so funny? "We are not aliens to each other anymore," she said. "We are simply us." 2 days later, the High Council's approval came through. David and Zalara would be commissioned as the first interspecies exploration team, their mission to make contact with new civilizations and establish the groundwork for future cooperation. As their ship, the Harmony, prepared for departure, they stood together on the bridge, ready to face whatever the galaxy might offer. David reached for Zalara's hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked. "With you?" "I'm ready for anything." The Harmony engaged its drive and disappeared into the star-filled void, carrying two beings who had found love in the most unlikely of circumstances. Behind them, they left a galaxy forever, changed by the simple truth that understanding could conquer fear, that love could bridge any gap, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to reach across the darkness and touch another soul. Their story would be told for generations, not as a tale of conquest or dominance, but as proof that the most powerful force in the universe was the capacity of two hearts to recognize each other across the vastness of space and time. And in the depths of space, as the Harmony sailed toward unknown worlds, David and Zalara Torres Voss began planning for the new life they would build together among the stars.